If you've been watching the news for about the past decade, you're probably familiar with our obesity problem in the U.S. and that one of the concerns we have for Americans is around maintaining a healthy body weight. So if we look at the current statistics regarding obesity in the U.S., I have a map here and it shows the percentage of the population which is considered to be obese. You can see that we have this clustering in this southern region here where the rate of obesity is between 30 and 36% of the population. Now these are just people that are characterized as a BMI of 30 or more, and within that range we have many definitions of obesity. It also doesn't include people who are at a BMI between 25 and 30, which is considered overweight. You can also see we have some green states here, and Colorado is consistently the healthiest state with the lowest BMI. But really the message here I want you to take away is that we have plenty of incentive to make some changes about our body weight. And so we're going to spend some time talking about weight loss and weight gain and how to maintain healthy body weight. Because weight loss, as difficult as that is, it's often much more difficult for people to actually maintain that weight once they've gotten there. So we'll look at some different ways that people can do this. Now, generally, when we talk about weight gain and weight loss, we think about energy balance, the amount of calories or energy going in and the amount of energy being used. It used to be that nutritionists would think this was a really simple equation and that it was really just about energy balance. But we're starting to understand that it's much more complex than that. It has to do with hormones, it has to do with basal metabolic rate, it has to do with gender, it has to do with all these social factors as well. And it's not really just biology. I think we often do people a disservice when we just focus on that. So when we start looking at weight loss, people tend to have some unrealistic goals, and we have to remember that it takes time to gain weight and it takes time to lose weight. So when we think about people who are losing weight fairly rapidly, I want you to keep in mind that dramatic, sometimes it can be a couple of pounds in a week, or it can be very slight, weight loss or even weight gain often is not reflective of composition, and it isn't body fat that people are losing that quickly. It tends to be fluid. So again, we want to be very careful when people are losing weight to not really focus on the scale that much. We want to focus on healthy eating and healthy lifestyle practices. Okay? Also, it correlates with time of day. So in the morning we tend to be taller and we tend to weigh less. So it'd be great if we could all just live in the morning and not worry about the rest of the day. But as the weight of the world is on our shoulders during the day, we tend to kind of slouch a little bit more and get compressed, and we tend to weigh a little bit more. So, keep in mind that these weight gains and weight losses tend to be water weight. Now, during weight loss, the body is going to call on those reserves, that stored energy that we have. One way to do this really effectively is with a small amount of dietary modification, so making some small changes towards healthy eating, but also physical activity. And unfortunately, this is a part that I think a lot of folks forget, because there are so many diet plans out there, but there really aren't a whole lot of exercise plans. And now you could disagree with that. You could say, well, I could go running, I could do Pilates or yoga or something like that. But in terms of physical activity, it's all the same thing. You're still moving. Whereas diet plans, they focus on low carbs or high protein or all these other kind of different ideas around dieting and what kinds of foods we should be eating. So keep in mind the recommendations for physical activity from the government. For a person who has an active lifestyle, meaning that maybe they're at a job where they're moving a lot during the day, 30 minutes might be okay most days of the week. But for the average American, we need an hour a day. I know in my own life, I'm sitting a lot of the time because I'm grading papers or I'm reading or something like this. So I really need to have an hour of physical activity a day. And if you have a desk job where you're sedentary, it's really kind of something we need to move toward. That can feel very, very overwhelming. So what I'll often say to people is move more. Right? You want to work up to, this goal of perhaps an hour a day, but for someone that isn't doing any physical activity, even some is better than none. For folks who are trying to lose weight, the recommendation is 90 minutes a day. That's huge. An hour and a half of exercise. That doesn't mean I have to be running for an hour and a half or be on a treadmill or something like this for an hour and a half. But you have to be moving, you have to be physically active. So it can include stretching and things like yoga. It can also be weight training. So lifting weights, doing calisthenics, and then also the cardiorespiratory exercise, which is like the biking and the running and playing soccer and basketball and things like that. It's the combination of that physical activity along with dietary modification that's really going to be our successful weight loss. Now, it's going to be gradual, and I can't stress this enough. When I would do diet counseling, I worked with primarily women who needed to lose anywhere from 50 to maybe 150 pounds. And if they only lost 1 pound a week, they were incredibly upset with me. And I would tell them that is success, right? If you're actually losing more weight than that, maybe 2 or 3 pounds a week, it is not going to be maintained, okay? Your body cannot adjust to that level of weight loss very successfully. I think when we look at TV shows like The Biggest Loser, that really does us a disservice because we see those people losing 7, 8, 9, 10, 15 pounds a week. And we're set up for failure when we kind of have that goal. So 1 pound a week is really optimal. Okay, maybe 3 to 5 pounds a month would be a good goal for someone. Also keep in mind that the more weight you have to lose, it's going to come off more quickly in the beginning and then kind of taper off. And when people get near their goal weight, they find it's often harder for them to lose weight. They can't get those last pounds that they're trying to lose. They hit a plateau. So at that point, they have to kind of kick it up a notch and maybe do a little bit more physical activity or increase the vigorous nature of the exercise. So kind of what I was talking about a minute ago is setting goals. So I want to talk about that just a little bit. So again, when I was doing diet counseling and these women would say, well, you know, I need to lose 75 pounds according to the doctor. I'd say, well, what's your goal? Well, 75 pounds. Well, no, we need to break that down a little bit because that can seem just so insurmountable. So we want to choose a small goal, about 5 to 10% of body weight, and that can still be quite significant for some folks. When we set a smaller goal, it's more realistic and it doesn't seem like this huge, huge weight on our shoulders. So we're going to do this by setting some diet goals as well. So it can be small things like increasing dietary fiber is a really good one, decreasing or eliminating alcohol use, things like this. Now, again, when people are first starting, they're going to say, well, I've got a list of 15 changes I'm going to make in my diet. And I'd say, whoa, whoa, let's pick one, do that for a couple of weeks, then go to the next goal. Because you want to actually choose a goal, maintain it, and then move on and set new ones. So we talked about physical activity, move more, and then behavioral goals and changes. So, you know, if you think about these, it's changing your lifestyle and your relationship with food, your relationship with exercise, and your relationship with the couch and the TV. So what I tell people is that very often the television is a trigger. So we want to have a snack when we're in front of the TV, so we have chips or these kinds of things. We very, very rarely snack on good foods in front of the TV. And even if we are doing that, we tend to mindlessly eat. We're in kind of autopilot with that bowl of food. Or heaven forbid, we get the package of food and bring in the whole bag of chips. I know I could eat the whole bag not even aware of my consumption. So we want to really change people's dynamics around food. And that can be really, really challenging because we're habituated to eat in front of the TV. And then I see the Pizza Hut commercial and I'm in the refrigerator rummaging around when I wasn't even hungry. So be very, very aware of those things. I encourage people to keep a food diary and keep track of their emotions when they're eating and why they're eating the foods they're choosing. So again, you know, weight loss should be slow. We don't want a rapid weight loss. And then recognize that maintenance is often much more difficult than the weight loss. And if you talk to people, and maybe you've even experienced this yourself, that you tend to, you know, increase your weight and then you go on a diet and lose it, and then you gain weight and maybe a little more weight, and you're on this kind of weight cycling. So many people are trapped in that because they're not changing lifestyle. So that's our goal for people. I'd rather have someone actually take 2 years to lose weight and get to their goal weight and be successful and change their life than to rapidly lose that weight, because it just isn't going to work, and it kind of sets you up for some metabolic problems sometimes. So we want to look at some low-calorie diet plans. And people will have a tendency to do this. They'll say, well, you know, I'm normally eating 2,500 calories or 2,000 calories or whatever it is. I'm going to cut that by half. And I have to say, no, 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 we don't want to do that. No more than about a 200, 250 calorie restriction per day. Okay, so you know that's the equivalent of a bowl of cereal and milk, or maybe a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, or something like this. Take that amount out of your diet, or the Hershey bar, whatever it is that you can do without. When we look at diet plans where they're putting people on about 800 calories, it's incredibly unrealistic. It actually changes your metabolism because your body says, you're not feeding me, I'm starving, I'm going to stop using energy at the rate at which I've been using it. Then they reach their goal weight and they start eating how they had been before, and they gain the weight back and they gain more weight back because you're not using energy at the same rate. So we want people also to concentrate on all of the different food, macronutrients. So it has to have carbohydrates and fat and protein. In the government, if you recall looking at these numbers, these macronutrient distribution ranges, we want those carbohydrates to still be within this percentage. That 45 to 65% of your calories or energy should be coming from carbs, and then we have these set for fat and protein as well. So, if you do a little kind of reading between the lines, a non-carb or a low-carb diet is not the way to go. It's really, really unhealthy, and this is not how your body is set up. This is not human biology by any means. Also consider that if you're cutting out those carbohydrates, it means you're not getting fiber. And fiber keeps you full and increases satiety. Fat and protein can also do that, but when you look at fat, this is a significant problem because it's very energy dense. So, if you just look at it from an energy density perspective, we want to have more carbs than fat. And then with protein, high protein diets are associated with fat. So you think about hamburgers and, any kind of meat tends to have quite a bit of fat, and it tends to have saturated fat. If you're having things like tuna and skinless, boneless chicken breast, that's a little bit different story. But most Americans aren't eating that kind of protein on a consistent basis. We're pushing them to, but they're not. So keep these different kinds of macronutrient distribution ranges in mind if you're setting up a new diet. Now, I also mentioned fiber when I just talked about carbohydrates. And there are a lot of advantages to having that fiber in your diet. We want unprocessed and whole foods. So, in their native form, in their natural state. They're going to provide bulk to fill you up, which increases satiety or that feeling of fullness. And they tend to have fewer calories than processed foods. So if you think about apples versus applesauce that's been sweetened, that's a good example. You can choose whole grains. And the mantra that we really like is make half of your grains whole. So choose whole grains when you can. They tend to be much higher in all those really important vitamins and minerals, as well as having the fiber, and getting away from the processed foods that might contain high fructose corn syrup and things like this that your body doesn't need. And choosing fats. Again, we don't want a fat-free diet, which in the 1980s was kind of in vogue, and that's what people were striving for. Instead, you want to choose smart fats, avoiding the saturated fats, and absolutely no trans fats if you can manage it. So that requires you to read labels and be very, very aware of those foods that might contain trans fats. You want to make sure you include enough for health. Okay, now so when we look at your fat allowance for a 2,000 calorie diet, you get 65 grams of total fat. Most Americans are consuming a lot more fat than is recommended by the USDA. So if we stay with the recommendations of 20 grams of saturated fat and 45 grams of unsaturated fat, that's a terrific goal, really. And that's going to be a healthy part of your diet. Now with protein, as I said earlier, we want it to be lean meats or other low-fat protein sources. That could be legumes, that could be fish, that could be fat-free or low-fat dairy as well. So you have a lot of choices there. You can also use beef. Beef is not a bad choice. You just want to make sure that the cut you're choosing is really low fat. That's going to mean probably very, very little ground meat. So instead going for a whole piece of sirloin or some kind of roast or something like that. So let's take a little bit of a look here at alcohol. Now, if you remember from our discussion about alcohol, it's really empty calories. So we want to limit intake because it's not going to really give us a whole lot of benefit when we're trying to lose weight. And when people have alcohol on board, they make different choices. Different kinds of social choices as well as different kinds of dietary choices. You know, maybe you go down to your favorite watering hole and you say, I'm just going to have one beer. One beer leads to 2 beers, and then it leads to chicken wings and nachos. So be really aware of that. I'm not saying absolutely no alcohol, just be very, very cautious about using it. With portion sizes, restaurants are a nightmare. You know, you think about you go out to dinner and you get a pasta meal, they probably bring you half a pound to a pound of pasta on that plate. And a serving is 1 cup cooked. So if you were actually to measure that out, many restaurant meals are 2 or 3 servings of pasta. There's a lot of bread. There's just more food than you need. Often it will feed 2 people, sometimes even 3, according to standard serving sizes. Okay? And when you're at home, you might use a measuring cup to kind of judge and learn portion sizes. So when you're pouring out the cereal or chips or something else, actually look at the serving size and see how you're doing. Very often people will be consuming more energy than they realize because they don't have a good understanding of serving sizes. Ice cream is a big one. Half a cup is a serving. So if you actually look at a half a cup in a bowl, you're like, wow, I'm getting robbed. This isn't very much. You can have 2 servings of any one food at a particular time. That's not a problem. But again, just be aware of how much you're consuming. So meal spacing, we want to stretch out that time between meals, and we definitely want to eat breakfast. There are a couple of really, really phenomenal studies using teenagers, and these girls were trying to lose weight, so they said, well, we're going to skip breakfast. What kind of lunch do you think they had? Well, if you said potato chips, cookies, and soda, you're absolutely right. They tended to reach for high energy foods because their body was screaming for energy because they hadn't eaten since the night before. So people who are skipping breakfast are actually more likely to be overweight. So with these girls in this high school, what they did was they put them on a sensible breakfast and they actually lost weight, but they were eating more food. They were just eating different foods. So eat breakfast, definitely. Make that part of your day. We also want to look at energy density. So I have this great example here. I have 2 salads, and here we have a Caesar salad, which a lot of people really enjoy, and it's got croutons and all kinds of things. And it's 500 calories, and if we weighed this salad, it would be 280 grams. So we can calculate, based on its energy and its weight, that it has an energy density of this 1.78. Okay? Now if we come over and look at this other salad over here, we still have a nice salad and it's got chicken breast on it, so we've got some protein there, it's got some mixed vegetables, almonds, cranberries, we've got a low-fat dressing, which is fine, or low-calorie dressing. And we have a dinner roll with some ham in it. So it's the same 500 calories, but look at the weight here. This is 570 grams of total weight. So we're getting almost twice as much food there. So our energy density is about half of the other salad over here. So this is what we want to strive for. We want to strive for people actually filling up on lower energy foods. One of the things I would commonly hear when people were on a diet that they put themselves on, not one that I did, they would say, I am so hungry. And immediately I would say, then you're not doing it right, because you need to have high fiber foods that are going to fill you up. Okay? So this is something actually that Weight Watchers has done in the past 10 years. They have a point system, but they also talk to their clients a lot about fiber foods and what kinds of foods they should be choosing when they have an opportunity. And it really increases people's level of satisfaction with a diet and their success. Because if you're feeling hungry on a diet, it's not a diet you're going to stick with. You also want a diet that tastes good. So if we looked at that lunch that had the salad and the dinner roll and the ham, that actually tastes really good to a lot of people, so they're going to stay with it. I talked about low-carb diets, and I, again, want to spend a little bit of time vilifying them because we've kind of been fed this notion that this is a diet plan that is good for rapid weight loss, and it's good for life. And people have success on it, which is the part that really kind of, is unfortunate. And you can have a significant amount of weight loss on a carb-free diet. And the way that this works is that if you're removing all of those carbohydrates from your body, you no longer have glycogen in your muscles. You're not storing any of that carbohydrate. And if you remember, when we talked about glycogen, you have to have water with it. So not only am I storing the glycogen, but I'm storing molecules of water in my muscles. So when people go on a carb-free diet, immediately your body is going to use that stored carbohydrate, and you're going to be shedding all of that water. So imagine if you're getting rid of all the water, your weight is going to go down very, very quickly in the first week or two. But again, it's only water weight. So when people kind of get to their goal weight and they start introducing carbohydrates, they gain weight back very, very rapidly because they have to have all of that water for their muscles to kind of match the glycogen. So it's a little tricky there. You have to kind of understand a little bit more about physiology. Now, one of the other things that tends to happen is that when people are on these low-carb diets, they're consuming fewer calories. Because if you think about what people have to eat on Atkins, all the butter and all the cheese and bacon and meat, we get kind of tired of that. Even people who love those foods say at some point they have protein and fat fatigue. You know, they just don't want another serving of eggs. They just can't do it. And I've talked to people who've done this, you know, for a couple of weeks, and they're like, I can't do this. Also people who, you know, are on this kind of Atkins-like diet, it's not one that they can maintain for life. It also tends to be pretty expensive as well. And the cheaper ways to do it, you know, having fattier cuts of meat and things like that, you really, really compromise your cardiovascular health. And that's been well documented in the literature. So, you know, we really want people to have, again, that well-rounded diet. And obviously a low-carb diet isn't going to do that. You also have to consider that, you know, even if you're going to be losing weight fairly rapidly, there is a long-term cost to this. So when we look at cardiovascular disease risk, it's really all this saturated fat that's in that low-carb diet that's problematic. Okay, so you know we have some other kinds of issues here as well. You know, a risk of ketosis. So there again, you have acidic blood, and you know people have died from doing Atkins and staying in this ketotic state too long because your body is just not meant to run this way. Especially your brain. Your brain has to have carbohydrates. So people on these diets tell me a couple things. They tell me one that they can't exercise. So think back critically to what I said earlier in our conversation, that if you're going to try and lose weight, it's about diet and exercise. So if you're doing a low-carb diet or a carb-free diet, you can't exercise. Your muscles just do not want to run on fat and protein. And then also you can't really think. So people will tell me this as well, that you know they just felt like their brain was in a fog because they didn't have enough carbohydrates. Okay? So those are a couple of things to kind of keep in mind. How about if we shift to looking at maintaining your new body weight and how we're going to be able to do that? So if you actually, you know, look at these fad diets, and some of the ones that are out there are completely outlandish. If you're familiar with the chocolate chip cookie diet or the grapefruit diet or the Sonoma County diet, you know, there's all these different ones. You know, you want to get away from that stuff. Any diet that promises you immediate results, asks you to get rid of whole food groups, those are ones to avoid right away. And if it sounds too good to be true, it is. Also, if they encourage you to buy a whole bunch of supplements or use pills or anything like that, or use enemas, coffee enemas, laxatives, anything that's going to, you know, cause you to vomit or die, you know, have bowel movements, stay away from that stuff, okay? Because you're actually going to compromise your health. And it actually, you know, we see people getting much more frustrated than they need to be, and also disappointed. Talking to chronic dieters, and people do this, they'll go through their entire life with this love-hate relationship with their body, and they get on these cycles of different kinds of fad diets. It's like in Shrek, if you've ever seen that, and Donkey talks about the onion, and he's got layers. I really believe that each one of these fad diets that people try adds layers. Right? Layers of disappointment and frustration and low self-esteem. And so when we talk about dieting, I can't say enough that I really want people to get back to basics, you know, and really do the hard work. And I know it's not easy. I absolutely recognize that. But to go back and just use a common sense approach to diet. One of the things that I want to stress about weight loss is that I want to make it not about the weight. And you're like, well, Lisa, that's the stupidest thing I've heard. It's not about the weight. You can be obese, but if you are physically fit and you exercise, your risk of death is no greater than someone who is a normal body weight and doesn't exercise. It's not about the body fat, really. It's about the lifestyle. So if you're eating healthy foods and you're exercising, the weight will take care of itself, okay? It may take longer, right? But you're actually moving towards better health. And you can imagine with my clients, my weight loss clients, this was not popular, right? And I didn't last long in that career because it was too common sense. So, you know, don't fall for these kinds of diet plans that are just really unrealistic. And when we look at weight maintenance, I want to recognize one thing here. And this is something that really kind of comes from 12-step programs or any kind of addiction. And I'm going to put out a bold statement here that I really truly believe that for some people, food is an addiction, okay? And that's a very controversial statement. If you want to start a fight with two nutritionists, just bring that idea up. But for people that are addicted to food, weight maintenance is really a lifelong pursuit. Okay? Just like for someone who maybe has had problems with alcoholism or drug abuse, it is every day making that choice to be healthy. Okay? And sometimes it's making that choice several times a day. Right? You have the box of donuts in front of you, and like the other day I opened it and I said, do I want a donut? And I actually thought about it for a couple of minutes and said, no, I'm going to close the box. I don't really want that. You know, it's not my long-term goal. It doesn't fit in for what I want for my life, you know, years from now. Okay? So these folks also have to be just very, very mindful and prepare in advance for thinking about situations that are going to put them in a place where they don't want to be. Right? So if you go out to a restaurant with friends, you know, think about how you're going to manage that. Also, you need to remain physically active and probably be a little bit more active than the average person, which is not bad. I mean, there's so many benefits to being physically active. You feel good, you sleep better. I mean, everything in your life is better. You know, you communicate better because you think more clearly. I can't say how important exercise is. Now, all the things that we did to lose weight are also things that we're going to do to maintain that weight, which should make sense to you. You know, it's a whole continuum of healthy living. So high fiber diet, we want to make sure that people have enough water every single day. So get away from those calorie-containing beverages because they don't increase satiety. Get rid of sodas and juices, period. If you want, you know, some orange or something like this, instead you actually have a piece of fruit. Have realistic expectations and actually honor your body if you can. I think it's so sad in the U.S. that so many people have this really poor self-image about their body and hate their body. Imagine going through life, you know, in this vessel that you hate, right? Instead, have that paradigm shift and be realistic about who you are. Also, we want to get away from weight cycling, okay? And that's what happens when people don't change their lifestyle. And it can really affect your immune system as well and increase your susceptibility to common colds and all those little bugs that we tend to get when we aren't really on our game. You know, maybe we aren't getting enough sleep, we aren't eating well, all that kind of stuff. So I hope that gives you some ideas about weight loss and maintaining body weight.